Hello, welcome everybody to our first panel for TransAction Florida's Transgender Awareness Week special. We're taking some time to speak with members of the community to help break some stigmas down and end some myths that are floating around here pertaining to each separate organization or each group. So we want to make sure that we're giving everybody a little bit of a spotlight moment. And today's panel features some community members from our non-binary community. So we're super excited to talk to each of you and have a moment with you all to let us know about yourselves and really talk about the stigmas that you face within your community. I'm mostly excited about this because I have had so much education on the non-binary community. And while I will agree that pronouns are hard and it's hard to when you know somebody in their transition or in their transition of life, I think that there's something joyful about hearing your pronouns used properly and being recognized and acknowledged in the way that you see yourself. So I think this is going to be a wonderful conversation to have. And I'm super excited that you guys are putting my they thems all the way to work tonight. I'm super excited. Some of you know me personally, but for the people who do not know you, I'm going to go around this circle, starting with the person who's to my left. If you'll introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Stevie. I use they, them pronouns. I've been a hairstylist for 14 years.
I love it. Yeah. And we'll go right below you.
Perfect. I am Kellen, they, he pronouns. I actually own and run a residential real estate team in the Tampa Bay. I'm also a parent, right? So I have a 4 and a 6-year-old. So when we talk about how all of these things are playing out, so often the rhetoric involves what that looks like for children. And I am living that all day from the parent standpoint.
I love that. Yes, you got a parent voice on the board. And last but definitely not least, right below me.
Hello, I go by Lilith Black, they, them pronouns. I am a local advocate and activist, especially in regards to trans rights and legislation.
I love this. Yeah. So we've got a little bit of everything. It's going to be wonderful. And for those of you who don't, pardon me, I'm like so silly about this. I was so excited by y'all. I forgot myself. Hi, everybody. I'm Angelique Godwin Young. I go by both, and I am the director of Transgender Equality with Equality Florida. And I am so excited to get started. So we're celebrating Transgender Awareness Week, and a part of doing that is kind of talking about what it means to us. So if each of you will go around in the same order and kind of let us know, what does this week mean to you?
To me, it means helping people that are maybe not part of our community see us and hear from us and hear our stories coming from our point of view so that maybe that way they can understand a little better. And I think that when people actually get to talk to or listen to a trans person, it changes the idea, this like diaphanous idea of what trans is, and humanizes it and connects it to real people. And I think that by humanizing concepts, it can elicit more empathy and more understanding and hopefully more love and care toward that community.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, visibility. I heard that like straight out the gate. Like, it makes a difference. What do they say? Representation matters.
Mhm.
100%. Callan?
Yeah, I think all of those keywords, right? Representation, visibility, but I really like the story piece of it because at the end of the day, so much about what is misunderstood about who we are in our community is based in just ignorance or fallacy. And people learn best through story. People want to understand that emotional capacity. They want to understand who are you, what makes you you. And I think that's the beauty of this week. I think about that like 10 years ago, I moved to Florida. I was the first LGBT coordinator at USF. So I was the first one in that professional role. And I think about how the conversations were going then and where they are now. And we're not as far into progression as you would have hoped that we would be. We're worse
Ooh.
in a lot of ways, right? And I
Yeah.
think about how we're doing all of this, and so much of it is from story, and so much of it is from really a place of people not knowing, people not understanding. So this week really allows people to do things like this, hear voices, understand. Even when I say I'm a parent, some people say like, what does that mean? What do these pieces look like? And I always tell people too, like when we get stuck in the language, I'm like, I majored in English and Spanish. The language doesn't have to be something that we use to exclude. There doesn't have to be something where we say, well, I don't have words to understand you, therefore you cannot be that. Instead, it's inviting people into a conversation and saying, here's my truth, here's who I am, and then allowing them to maybe make sense of that for themselves. Because so often I think it's a fear of what people don't know and understand versus an actual issue for people who are willing to listen.
Yeah. And last but not least, Lilith.
I love what both of y'all said about humanizing and normalizing trans people in the public eye. And I do think that is an incredibly important part of, especially this week. But I also think, speaking as someone who has a lot of young trans siblings, it's important for them to see adults living their truth, living happily and freely, especially outside of the very restricted expectations that they might have to live in. So while we are simultaneously educating allies or even flipping potential anti-trans people, we are also allowing our youth to have a safe space to see that there is a future for them and to know that even with a lot of the hatred that they see in the world, we still get to live our lives every day, find what happiness means to us. And hopefully that can be inspiring to people who are struggling right now.
Yeah, definitely. I love this. Ooh, this is also such a good start. I wanted to acknowledge something that Callan said with language used to segregate, in a sense. I think the easiest thing for me when you meet somebody who might be struggling with the ideology behind pronouns is just to be reassertive in your name. I think my biggest obstacle with my family was that, and being like, listen, if all else fails, just call me by my name. Like, just use my name in the sentence. It works the same way as a pronoun. It just asserts who it is you're talking about. It just dignifies me with something even more powerful for me personally than my pronoun, because my name is mine. You know what I mean? It's partially what I chose. It's the one I'm known by. And I felt like that was super important. And then also I wanted to address the use of trans siblings. This is a terminology that we use in the community because we want to respect those who use the pronouns they and them. It's something that I didn't realize, and I was hearing it a lot. And I was like, trans. I was like, y'all got siblings that are trans. I was like, y'all are lucky. Like, I wish. And they're like, no, girl. Like, it's a nice way to include everybody and to put everybody in the same thing, because in a sense we are family and we are looking after each other. And no one knows chosen family, I think, more than the LGBTQ family. But I truly feel like the trans community specifically is really like, we are natural born parents. We absorb everybody and we partner with everyone, and there's no one that we turn away from, I feel like, especially this newer generation. On a whole nother topic to talk about the old generation, but where we are now, at least for me, like my generation and newer, it's all about inclusivity and making sure people understand and feel seen. So I think that I love hearing you say that. And I just want to acknowledge that for the viewers who may not know what that terminology means, because they probably are hearing you say that and be like, how many siblings you got? That I don't know, they're over there doing the math on their fingers, looking like the little meme of the woman who can't figure out the equation. So but yeah, that's awesome. But sorry, I will do this the whole night if y'all let me, but I want to get back on topic. So we're here to kind of introduce viewers and people to the non-binary community and to help bridge the gap as to why you guys are considered to be a part of the trans community as a whole. And I think we have to start at the very first question, which is, what does non-binary mean and how does that relate to you? And we'll go in reverse this time, Lilith.
I struggle to attach a non-extremely vague definition to terms like non-binary, because I think the idea of a non-binary identity is kind of antithetical to having a set selected identifiers to like what that means. So to me, at least, the entire existence of a non-binary identity existing lends itself to interpretation from whoever that is. And that may not be helpful to a lot of people who may be a bit confused But I think to an extent, it's really easy to get lost in language and in the concept of identity when I think non-binary people can be a key point in respect, because the reality is a lot of us are never going to be understood by the general public. And that doesn't mean that you can't treat us with respect. That doesn't mean that you can't show us the same respect that you give people who may present in a binary way. So I think the concept of non-binary identity is opening up the language, the lifestyle, and the opportunity for people who don't fit into a traditional binary space.
Okay, and Callan?
Yeah, for me, it's building on that within the language. And we're in nations that is very focused on narrow boxes, very focused on who people are expected to be, very focused on this and then that. And I used to, when I would do safe zone trainings and things, I also would tell people, like, our identities are not school. It's not something where you can learn non-binary means this, and every single time it will be applied in that exact same way, and then you get an A. Right? That it's not that. Identity is something that exists within somebody. So the way that they are going to really explain how that authentic identity shows up for them, there will be pieces and there will be patterns. I think the other piece within this is that within the non-binary community, we have different sex assigned at birth. So we're also part of something that we're dealing with so many different pieces of who were we assigned, who were we allowed to be, how were we raised, what did that look like as we moved into gender. And for me, binary in our system is that if you're assigned female at birth, they say you're a girl who's going to become a woman. If you're assigned male at birth, you're a boy who's going to become a man. That's what we mean when we say binary. So non is that we're not any of that. Right? When people say, why are we trans? It's because who I was told I had to be is who I never was. It's a piece of, got an A on that one, right?
Yeah.
I know I'm not a man. And I know that I'm a trans masculine person who identifies as being non-binary in a way that I don't have all of the words for that, because I don't know that they exist in our social context for the way that they play out for me. And I also think that the non-binary piece too is giving people an umbrella, just as so many parts of our community comfortably use queer. If we put into the generational context, that has changed drastically. I think we're also seeing that within the trans community of allowing people to have different verbiage that aligns for who they are. Because at the end of the day, the one thing that we share is that we've all had moments of other people telling us we couldn't be who we knew that we were. So for me, more identities, more space, more validity is simply allowing people to exist as who they are versus having those moments where they wondered if they ever would be or if they ever could show up. So I'm all for the language. I'm all for the pieces and saying we are stronger together. And at the end of the day, there's more about us that is similar than is different. So I think that's why we're here.
Yeah. Oh, good, good, good. Stevie?
To kind of touch on what both of the other guests said, I think that non-binary people, we embody the gray between everything. We can present in any way, we can identify in very different ways, but we all somewhere fall between those really rigid binary ideas of what a man is and what a woman is and what that's supposed to look like or what that person is supposed to bring to society. And I think what Lilith was saying is that we can help to kind of open the conversation of why do we decide that certain things are for this sex or this sex or this gender or that gender. We can really be a catalyst for change with the social constructs that are behind gender. And I think that that's really kind of the power that non-binary people in general, we embody that. I think that we can actually really be a positive catalyst for change for even more binary trans individuals, because if we can really break down why it is that we think a woman looks a certain way or a man looks a certain way, if we can break that down, then we can actually make it easier for even binary trans people to be understood and interpreted as the gender that they are, because we're breaking down what all of the very arbitrary definitions are for a man and a woman, because we're in the middle of all of that and we can pull the whole thing apart.
I love that. The vernacular of this group is outrageous, by the way. I love all of y'all. So just to just to have my 2 cents as you guys were talking, I love what you just said, Stevie, about being a catalyst for change, because I feel like the emergence of the non-binary community has definitely impacted the transgender community in a sense of I love food and I like analogies, right? So if the trans community was always presenting, let's say, a difficult food, or Mexican street corn, elote, right? It has to be on the corn. It's got to have the butter. It's got to have the tahini. It's got to have it like that. I feel like the non-binary community is the deconstructed form of that. Why can't we have it in a cup? Why can't it come in a bowl? Why can't we add these things on top? Why can't we have something underneath? It truly breaks the idea of that. And in essence, it's a perfect analogy to explain the binary versus the breaking of that. I feel like my whole life as a trans woman, I was forced to pick a side. I felt like, I wasn't feminine or female enough prior to my transition to walk that line with them. I was good enough to be on the line and support them through all of the changes that they went through in life, but I was never allowed to experience it. And then now I'm in this place where I fully transitioned and I feel like I walk with them, but in my mind, I don't want to leave behind everything that I've learned, right? I don't want to get rid of all of my experiences. I'm not foregoing the life that I lived in any essence. I still carry all of that training. A part of me still enjoys the things that I learned to do that might be considered masculine, but I just have an exterior that screams feminine energy. But I've never ever considered myself masculine or feminine. I've always considered myself energy wise in the middle. I just prefer an outwardly appearance of feminine energy. And I think that that's something that even that I know so many women in my life who were teased or made fun of for having masculine features or for dealing with things that were beyond their control, like PCOS, with hair growth or hair loss and different features, dominant genes. I feel like nobody paid attention in biology, man. Punnett squared. If your daddy got a strong chin, you're going to get a strong chin, baby. There's no getting around it. It just is what it is. And that's why we have doctors who spent decades learning plastic surgery to help you with that chin, baby girl. It's going to get there. It's whatever. But some people like it. It's so funny to me that they'll tease somebody in one picture and then you'll see somebody walking down a runway making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year because they have great cheekbones, or one little catchphrase can turn everybody's life upside down, right? What was it? Lady Gaga said in American Horror Story, your cheekbones could kill. And then everybody want killer cheekbones. And I'm like, that's crazy to me how something that might have been made fun of is now something that's looked at by the entire world as good, right? So why can't we do the same with this? It's that open-ended opportunity to experience something and view it differently. And I think it comes down to who says it, right? If somebody says it's cool, everybody's gonna be like, all right, let's go and jump on it. But we're waiting for that right person to be like, this is fine, let it go, right? But I digress. Also, we are not monolithic, Helen. Oh my God. We're not just, it's not that simple. Nothing is ever that simple. I don't think you could ever really put this group into that category of just being any group, really, any one of us. I don't think lesbians are monolithic. I don't think gays are monolithic. I think that there's so much diversity within that and in those groups and how we choose to present ourselves. But it is because of all of the factors that brought us there, right? It's not only your sex at birth, but how you were raised, the people around you, the way that you were nurtured, the way that you grew up, whether you grew up in an area that you saw and experienced things for the first time and realized that it was okay to do that, right? You grew up on a cornfield your whole life. You think corn is the best thing until you see the cattle farmer, and then you find the person down the street is growing okra and you're like, oh my God, like this is beautiful. This is so much easier. Like your mind expands. So I feel like people need to get out of that idea. There's so many cultures that do that send people into other cultures to culture shock them and see if this is really for them. So I love that. And then the last thing was not understand who we live for, like that ideology that we spend our lives living for other people. And this community specifically is a group that is constantly badgered and beaten upon because we choose to live happily. We choose to express ourselves in a way that bring us joy. We're not living for other people. We choose to live for ourselves. And that was the first time I ever saw selfish as a good thing. It was the first time I ever saw that doing selfishness is not really selfishness if it's helping you grow and feel better and experience life from a bright side. Everybody's gonna have pain and sadness. Sorrow. That's gonna happen to everybody. I don't care who you are. But to do that with this weight off your shoulders, because you know that you are you at the end of the day. You know that you're happy when you look in the mirror and you know who you are. That kind of grounding, that kind of foundation, you can't buy that. You just can't. It just, once you hit that reality moment. So if somebody tells me that they're non-binary and they prefer to be they, them, it's an instant in my mind. I'm like, okay, if that's what it takes for you to be happy, then that's you, because I know what that feels like on the other side of it. So I love that. I want to move on into, because we're talking about stigma from so many various places. What do you guys feel is the biggest stigma you guys face as being a part of the non-binary community? I'll start with Callan.
So I think even before getting into that, I do want to acknowledge off of something that you said, Angelique, about we often do a really poor job as a community in talking about the pervasiveness of intersectionality within who we are, specifically within non-binary identities. There often is a media assumption of whiteness, of androgyny, of very narrow boxes of who people can be and what that looks like. And the reality is we cover all races, genders, abilities, right? Like, let's get into all of the different pieces. And when we talk about how that plays out, we have to acknowledge that specifically who you are, where you were raised, how you were allowed to act, who, at what age you were able to step into some of your authenticity, has a huge impact in who you are. And I just want to acknowledge that. And I think so often, sometimes when we highlight a lot of whiteness in these conversations, we lose some of those really important pieces of what does it look like within various lived experiences. So I think that that's important. When we get into stigma, I think it all relates. And I would say a stigma is a perception that we are trying to be provocative, or that we're trying to do something new for the sake of being new and trendy. Like, I remember even when I came out as gay, my mom was like, is it trendy? It's like, right. Because I forgot that oppression was trendy. Like, I did say that to her, right? We're a little tough on that. But I think so often when we look at stigma and we look at who are we and where are we allowed to go, that so much of what's being imposed on us is this notion of, well, why do you have to be this extra thing? Why aren't the boxes that we already had enough? Or why can't you just be one of these things? And this notion of being provocative for the sake of not just being who we are. And I think that when you get into something, I also talk about gender, that if you were raised with people that you're biologically related to, often gender, if you are a trans person or a non-binary person, is really the first aspect of who you are that might be completely beyond their experience of sameness that they thought they had with you, because so many other aspects of who you are and who they are probably align a little bit more. Ability might be one that is an outlier also. So often when we talk about gender, I think for people who've never considered it, I was raised really staunchly Catholic. And I look at my mom, that she didn't even consider that she didn't have to be Catholic until she was in her 60s, when I said, you don't have to be Catholic. Just because you were told you were Catholic as a child doesn't mean you're actually Catholic. But it's one of those, and I always said, like, I have so much respect for people who, regardless of who they are, if they've taken time to explore who they are, why they believe what they believe, how they show up in the world, if that is authentic to who they are, how do you not have respect for that? When we get into all of these conversations, we realize that most of these gendered boxes serve no one. I love when I ask a group of women, I'm like, how many of you who wear makeup have ever had the moment where somebody says, you look tired because you weren't wearing makeup that day? It's all made up. We have all of these pieces about who people have to be for the consumption of other people. And when you actually break down all of it, that's why folks have something to say about us, because we're just showing up and saying, here's who we are. And we're not doing it in a way that is palatable and consumable for you first. And that's why people say, I don't know about that, because they're used to us falling in line and being who they want us to be.
Me, I'm women. Kids are so honest, though. Honest to God, the kids are the worst. They're the first one to be like, are you okay? You look tired. I'm like, let me go put my concealer on, because this kid is not about to ruin my day. So but I definitely agree with that. Some highlights and phrases, because I love these things. Small minds can't see big pictures. Mm-hmm. Small-minded people will always try to bring you back. People who are stuck in a box can't think outside the box. So they want you to stay in the box with them. They're never going to let you out. And so that's the idea and the concept of always standing your ground and expressing yourself. I feel like you should never have to break yourself down so that you're easier to digest. Let people choke. I am all about letting it be, and I'm a big old cookie, baby. You can't break me. There's no deliciousness in a small bite over here. I need you to take a whole bite and that's it. And then lastly, people love the version of you that they can control. A lot of times our family members and the loved ones, the people you expect the most love from, are the ones who they want you to stay that little person that did as they were told, or that person who they remembered, who they could make an influence on and make someone like not necessarily follow their law or their rule, but do exactly like you said with your mom following in religion, like that ideology that I don't even want to learn something else because it goes against what I've been taught, right? And I think that even that, saying that out loud, you realize the moment you say it is saying like, oh my God, if I go over there and I learn something else, I'm going to be heartbroken because it's going to break everything that I've built on, you know? And I think that that is so true in any aspect. You can apply that to your work, to your relationships. A lot of people never want to see the truth about a situation because they've built an idea in their head that they're standing on. And it's once you realize there's nothing underneath you to stand on, you start to fall apart. But if you walk into the situation like, let me come down from this cloud and see what's down here, and you willingly step down, there's no fall. There's no harm in it being explorative or being curious. And nothing comes from that. It only comes from it if you choose to accept it, if you want it. My lifestyle doesn't, I don't touch people and turn them into, you have to come and sit and listen and figure out if it's for you. And if it's for you, then that's your journey. It has nothing to do with me. That's you making your own decisions, right? I think accountability is something that everybody has an issue with. Yet again, that's a whole nother topic we can talk about. But Stevie, how are you feeling about it?
I think one of the biggest stigmas for that a lot of non-binary people face is that it's a new thing, and non-binary identities have been around for as long as binary identities have been around. We have better language to explain the experience now, but the identities have always been there. It's not some new fad. It's not something that only young people feel. Like, I'm 41. I came out as non-binary when I was 37, I want to say. So it's not a new thing, and it's not only for kids to be non-binary. I think there's also, speaking of how you were saying about it being this idea of whiteness and androgyny, I have noticed there's also a expectation of only people that were assigned female at birth are non-binary. There aren't people that were assigned male at birth that are non-binary. They just are on their way to becoming a woman. I have people all the time that ask me, so when are you getting breast implants? When are you doing this? And I'm like, no, that's not my journey. I'm a non-binary person. Yes, I was assigned male at birth, but even though I am on a medical transition, they have this expectation of what that's going to be. And there's this assumption that I'm going to be a woman, even though I've specifically said that's not what I am either. So I think that's my experience as somebody that was assigned male at birth, and my experience as someone that is on a medical transition journey specifically.
Yeah, I think a lot of times I run into that a lot as a drag entertainer. I'm in a lot of rooms with people who they don't want to go beyond their current transition and they don't acknowledge themselves as women and yet they don't acknowledge themselves as men. And I find it ironic and almost no, you know, I'm gonna be bold, I'm gonna be that girl. I find it a little hypocritical that they don't understand the non-binary community because they themselves technically are literally the prime example of someone who chooses to live their physical life one way and present themselves another way, but mentally feels like they don't belong to any of it and that it's their choice and they have the right to utilize their free will as they see fit. And I think that that's literally in my mind how it works. And yet they're like, but no, but I don't understand. And this doesn't fit or this isn't working. There's a lot of gatekeeping that happens in those spaces, as if they have the keys to a gate they can lock, but whatever. But that's a whole nother conversation. But I think that that resonates with me because I hear that a lot and I see that a lot in my life and in my journeys and in my travels. So I feel like that's a super relatable topic. Lilith?
I see a very similar, and I'm glad we are touching on how non-binary identities can also affect people within the queer community, because I think that a lot of times when people hear about stigmas in relation to non-binary identities, they think of the traditional, oh, this person has this idea of male and female that is just outdated and they're having a hard time. But sometimes when people have already gone through this process of exploring their own gender expression and identity, having someone else come into the picture who is essentially throwing all of that to the wind can be kind of distressing. And that's where I found a lot of the stigmas that are aimed at us come from is it's almost a reflection of each individual person's relationship with gender, or more so their insecurities about gender. A lot of times, because we don't subscribe to the same ideas around presentation, identity, and gender that a lot of other people do, we end up coming face to face with their journey and processing their relationship with gender. So a lot of that ends up coming out at us, whether that's cis people just genuinely being confused, or a lot of times it's trans people who see someone like me and are reminded of an earlier part of their life where they weren't living their truth. And they like to maybe say, hey, you're not living your truth yet, because they see themselves in us. And I think that kind of just brings me back to the whole, like, as a society, as a community, as species, we have to get to a point where we can just respect people without having to understand them. Because so often that what may feel like an attempt at understanding can just be projection. And that's where a lot of those negative stigmas, those things that people don't even realize they're putting on us, come from, is people projecting their own realities.
Can I just add to that, right? Like, so many people will do more work in 2 minutes to get a dog's pronouns right. I'm not and not even being funny, right? But folks
Yeah,
are
Proud about it.
it's so true.
how dare they get Scout's pronouns wrong?
The
Because Scout was
snapback.
wearing orange and they couldn't tell, right? And people have this emotional response. In the instant we say, hey, here's who we are and here's language that you can use to affirm us, they won't even give us those 2 minutes, right? So I think that those are the pieces that when we talk about the labor that people are willing to do and how we can all show up together in this work within our truth, people are already doing it. They just are comfortably not showing us the respect that Lilith so beautifully explained, to offer us that grace and that space that they often ask for.
I think I had said this earlier before we got on camera, but or before we started recording, but I do really feel like now more than ever, my analogy earlier of people want to see us as, they want to put you in a box. And first it was always, it's black or white. You're either this or that. You can only like this. Like, with gays, it was like, you have to like men. And then it was like, who's the top and who's the bottom? Like it had to, the definitions just come as yes or no's, or one or two, or A or B. It's never a long game. And so I put down, as with most emergencies, people expect black and white, but it's definitely not that simple. And now they have this rainbow, and we've gotten them to accept the rainbow, right? And they're like, oh, it has to be that. And I'm like, no, it's never was a rainbow. You only just saw a rainbow. Mm-hmm. It was always a kaleidoscope. It was always multiple colors shining through in different areas. And it wasn't simply in the one order, right? The colors don't have to always align in that order to present as a rainbow, right? So this non-binary emergence is not something new. It's just people are starting to see for the first time, or they're starting to have a language for the first time. And I feel like this is like an awesome thing, because it just helps the expansion, and the expectation of what is or what was male or female is no longer stuck having these strong definitive things, right? It's no longer women in dresses, women wear pantsuits. It's no longer men in pantsuits, they can wear skirts, they can wear dresses. Well, they've always been wearing skirts. I love an Irish man in a skirt, baby. There ain't nothing wrong with it. But these are things that we make excuses for, right? We say, oh, this is acceptable because it's culturally acceptable. But you're not from that culture, you're not in that culture, so you can't do it. It's that is a wild to me. Like, baby, if it exists and it happens in some of the most masculine, toxic countries in the world, Because I mean, if we're gonna go to the Middle East, all of them wearing full on head to toe dresses and robes and all kinds of things, in every aspect of the culture. Even going further back into, China's history and Japan's history and just all around the globe, this is something we've noticed that has happened always. And it was seen as a sign of like, royalty or money. These people had status, and we're allowed to do this. So here now in America, it's supposed to be the greatest place in the world. Is the one place that can't nobody live in peace and be free. Once again, another topic, but I love this. This is great. One thing I wanted to address that you guys all have said or have acknowledged to was the comment of whiteness. And I just want to kind of dig into that just a little bit. Does anybody want to kind of give a more in-depth explanation of what you mean by the term whiteness? Anybody want to step up into that one? First one, to speak.
I will if nobody wants to. Go ahead.
You go ahead.
Go ahead.
Right. So whiteness was created by white people. It was created as a power system, really at the beginning of our country, as a way to gain more power and to gain essentially what we see as so many systems and power pieces. This is the off the cuff, right?
Yeah.
But really, when we're looking at things, we're looking at whiteness. It's not culture. It's not. It's something that has been imposed based on perceptions of skin tone, and with it has really built problematic and oppressive systemic pieces that say who gets to have what and how do we frame things based on normalization? How do we frame things based on desirability? How do we frame things based on truly the pervasive racist pillars that built this country? And when we look at how we talk about our community overall, there's a lot of whiteness within these conversations, and there's a lot of expectation of what it means to be representative of identities. And I think so often when we don't name some of that, specifically, we have to acknowledge difference in race, difference in ethnicity, difference in geographic regions, ability, so many things that inherently decide who you are. I'll never forget, it was 10 years ago, I was at a conference and they were talking about identity. And there was a Black, Southern, cis Christian woman and a white, lesbian, Jewish woman. And the first thing that they said was, our race makes being a woman different. And they just let it sit. Because I think that that's what people don't always realize, is that there are so many aspects of who we are and how other folks read us. And when it comes to race and color and whiteness and being white passing, we have to acknowledge that that is something that drastically affects every bit of our lives.
I love that. Just to add to it a bit more, because I have a bit of a different relationship with whiteness, just because I like to see it less as, because at its core, so whiteness doesn't have a defined definition. It doesn't, you can generally say like a Eurocentric idea of life, skin, and style, but like there are so many different cultures in Europe that doesn't quite land. Whiteness at its core simply is an idea that exists to other people, to create an other, to create something that can be classified as non-white. It's less about what is whiteness and about what doesn't count as whiteness. So I'm part of a very large group of white people that believes that it doesn't benefit society as a whole to perpetuate this idea of whiteness. And that can sound great, that can feel like you're doing something, but the reality is, when the world perceives you as white, when you are white, when you are light-skinned, when your experience contains whiteness, you simply do not face certain struggles that a lot of other people have. So you can, I denounce whiteness, I hate this, all you want, but your experience in the world is still going to be affected by that whiteness. And I think there are two sides of that. We talk all the time about acknowledging privilege, but I don't think we talk enough about, if privilege is going to exist, it can be utilized in ways that we're frankly not doing. Not enough white people are stepping it up. Very often in spaces like this, where you get to be on camera and you get to do your thing, you'll find those volunteers. But if you go to the events where we're working hard, where we're fundraising, where we're trying to actually like make some change, you see a lot less white people doing the work. So not only is whiteness this pervasive thing that tells us expectations of beauty and lifestyle, but it's also this thing that is generally primarily used to put other people down and not often enough used to take that privilege and help others. I think we can do a lot of work, especially within the queer community, since we've already done this work around gender, to rethink our relationship with whiteness. And if you happen to be born as a white person, how you can use that to better help people who don't have those same privileges.
Any other comments on whiteness?
I agree completely with what both of you have said. And I think that it's important that as white people, we're allowed access and given importance. And like Lilith was saying, we should be using that voice that is heard louder and respected more just because of the culture that we live in to uplift and empower and hopefully open the minds of some people that maybe haven't spoken to or are not really very close to any people of color. If you hear someone saying something that is vaguely racist or is teetering on the edge, maybe softly guide them to, oh, hey, actually, that's not how this is. And I think that there's a way that it can be done where, as white people, I think that our job is to guide those that are also white that will listen to us, unfortunately, over a person of color to open their mind a little bit more and hopefully be able to get them to listen to a person of color and understand their experience a little better. Like we can kind of, for lack of a better word, shepherd them into more acceptance because they're going to take what we say as more important anyway because of the privilege that we hold.
That's interesting. This is not the direction I thought this conversation was going to go. I'll be honest. When we first started talking about it, I thought we were talking about it in a sense of the expectation of what non-binary individuals look like and what the representation looks like, and the lack of visibility. I think for me, as somebody who is of color and grew up with what I feel like now is what, and when I look back at my history and I look back at the individuals in my life who were gay, and I just didn't really understand that. You know, there were a lot of gay men who were allowed to be in Black communities and express themselves outwardly as gay and dress up and be fun. And they didn't have to be a drag queen or be like a trans person. They just were effeminate gay men who wore makeup and fun clothes and just always were what would be considered loud and outlandish, but that was their way of walking the line. They didn't want to be women. They had no intention of ever being women, but they presented themselves in women's clothing, and they didn't try to wear breasts or didn't try to wear body. I think that there was a lot of that visibility for me growing up. So there was never a point where I looked at someone and got confused. I just assumed that that's what they liked, right? That's who they are. And then I would later go to see that in film and television. And I felt like that was something that just became natural, right? And I think that is what everybody's first introduction to the gay community became, right? Because there were so many gay people who came and like, that's not me. I'm just a man who likes men, right? And the lesbians were like, I'm just a woman who likes women. I might like her with lipstick and I might like her a little bit more butch, like whatever. Like, and it became this thing that expanded. And that's where we go back to where we started the conversation with that ideology of everything has to be on one thing or the other. And it's not quite what it seems, but it also comes back to a couple of things that you guys have all acknowledged. When these things were happening, we just didn't have the verbiage. We didn't have the ability to speak about it, let alone put it in such a beautiful package. To be like, I am this, and it's separate from that. And I honestly think that that is enough. I think that to say that I am not the gender conforming binary individual, I'm somebody who chooses to express myself outside those norms, is enough. I don't think you have to say more than that. I think that that's enough. Just I don't fit normal gender constructs is enough. It's a sentence. It's enough. It's almost like saying no, thank you, but no thank you. That's not for me. This is who I am, and I love that. But at this time, we're gonna go around and we're gonna finish. I would love to keep this going all night long. This is like so good. I'm so hyped. Y'all are gonna make it very hard for a girl to go to sleep, but I love this, and I just want to ask everybody as a round-up question: what's one stigma or myth that you wish you could bust or get rid of if you could? We're talking Thanos snap, like baby, just if you could get rid of it, what would it be? And you guys can go around. I'll start with Callan because I feel like
Oh,
Callan does.
geez.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't know. Don't pick me first.
Oh no, never mind. Steve,
Anybody have one? If you have one, please go.
Oh God.
Whoever's got one first. Sorry, I caught y'all off guard.
Lilith is ready.
All right. Okay. Wait.
Well, for me
I have
personally,
one.
I'll start with you guys. I wish that we could just end the stigma of everything being a one size fits all explanation. I wish that people would just allow people to have everything from triple extra small all the way up to quadruple XL, not just or XLLL, not just like I hate the idea of uniformity. I don't like uniforms. I never have been a uniform girl. So in any sense, so except for the men that I like, but that's about it. But on me personally, I don't like uniforms. So I think that I wish that we could break that stigma in respect to the non-binary community, because there is no one size fits all. Everybody's different. Every color, creed, age, race, gender, it all goes out the window. It's all about just self-expression and presenting yourself in truth. And I believe in standing in the light and standing in the sun. And I think that non-binary people do that so beautifully when you give them an opportunity to share who they are as a person, which is why I'm friends with all of you. But like, it's a magnetism. It's something beautiful about it and helps you express yourself better. So I wish people could see that and experience that the way that I did.
I wish that people would drop the idea of non-binary identities being, or the idea of non-binary identities complicating things, or it being difficult or confusing. And I think that people are just too caught up in whether it's language or concepts behind like traditional gender roles, and aren't focused enough on just respecting each other. I think we've been publicly visible for long enough that we shouldn't have to so regularly explain and defend ourselves to exist in public. I have so many friends who are binary trans people who have gotten themselves to a point where they're like, I'm just going to go about my day, no makeup, no signifiers, no visual description of gender, and just be my gender. And I sometimes find myself putting almost an inordinate amount of time into my presentation because I feel like if I'm not androgynous enough, I won't be seen as valid in my gender identity. So I think just like accepting everybody as who they are, whether you understand it, whether you see it, whether you agree that they are that way, would just take our entire world and move us a huge step forward.
Mine actually builds exactly on that. That I really wish that we could get rid of the notion that gender identity equals gender expression, or that there's a level of how much it has to equal. Specifically, when we talk about non-binary folks and often being policed as to how much transition is required. Who can you be? How do you have to look? Have you done enough to be enough of this? And I think so often that we make things mean things that they don't. So gender identity is who you know yourself to be, right? And then how that is shown externally. If your clothes, hair, makeup, facial hair, anything about you is different tomorrow, that doesn't mean that your gender identity is. It just means that that's how you're moving through the world that day. And I think that there's a lot of narrow rigidity there. And I really think that within a lot of non-binary folks, some of the pushback too from other people is for people who don't intend to change their bodies in any way. Then there's sometimes a perception of, well, then are you trans or are you non-binary or what does that mean? And really, I think for trans people overall, respecting all of us to get to determine if and what a transition looks like for us, that it could involve multiple steps, it could involve no steps, but none of that in any way controls who somebody knows themselves to be.
I love that.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And lastly,
yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I think that the biggest issue that non-binary people fall into is people trying to put us within some kind of binary. And once people can accept that we literally just exist outside of that expectation, they will stand it a little more. But understanding someone else's experience is going to be very hard because it's not your experience. So I would say the expectations of you have to be androgynous enough, or if depending on what your sex assigned at birth is, how far have you gone to express yourself in a way that signifies to others that you do not identify with that gender that you were assigned at birth, and the expectation of the medical transition or not medical transition, social transitions, really there's a lot of expectation put on non-binary people that is all really coming from the binary idea, and we're not that.
Well, thank you guys so much for being a part of this. You guys have led an awesome discussion on the non-binary community, and I love that this is how we're kickstarting our Trans Awareness Week. And I think if anybody watches this and doesn't walk away feeling like you guys are definitely a part of the community, then they really don't know the community, because I feel like everything you guys talked about resonated with me in my journey. And while I don't consider myself non-binary, I think that there's a lot of things that I did in my journey that definitely crosses over that line between both sides. So it's respectable and it's understandable, and it ain't complicated, y'all. So no matter how complicated it might seem, I think the most complicated thing in this video was our vernacular, our vocabulary. It was off the hook. I loved it. Y'all can be a part of the TV series writing all day, any day. I love it. But thank you guys again one more time. Just huge shout out to you guys for joining us and lending your experiences and your voices. I really do hope that everyone walks away from this a bigger and better person. And I look forward to talking with you all again in the future. Thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful night. And to you viewers at home, stay tuned. We have more panels coming up as the week continues. And I can't wait for you guys to see our next group of wonderful people from the community telling their stories and experiences. Thanks again. Have a wonderful time.